Now, I mentioned in the last slide that even though we were seeing some positive things out of the Pendleton Civil Service Act, there were still some issues and some problems. One of the big ones was the fact that politicians were now turning to those who had money in order to finance their campaigns. And so, this last little section here we have is on the actual purchasing of influence by businesses. Now, this is still a complaint, an issue, or however you want to phrase it today. There are still those very concerned with whether or not uh, business and industry has too much say in how people get elected. I leave that totally up to you. Now, political reformers in the late 1800s, one of the things they were concerned with was what are called tariffs. Now, a tariff, by definition, is a tax placed on goods coming into or going out of a country. Now, tariffs generally mean this. Okay, let's say you're going to buy a shovel. Okay, and you're going to buy that shovel from Canada. Well, you have two choices. You have the American shovel, which costs $1, and you have the Canadian shovel that costs 75 cents. And let's say they are 100% equal. There is no difference between the two whatsoever, except where they are made. Well, a tariff in this case could be like, say, another dollar on the Canadian shovel. Therefore, you've got two choices now. One is $1 and one is $1.75. And most people, if there is no difference between the two, are going to buy the cheaper of the two. Now, of course, if there is some kind of significant difference between the two, that might really influence your decision. But if everything else is equal, then you usually go for the cheaper one. Now, in this case, this is a way for the government to actually make money because anything that's coming into the country, this is essentially a tax on that particular item that goes straight to the government. And so this is a way to benefit, the government itself without having to do income tax. Now, a lot of Americans believed then and to this very day that tariffs are necessary to protect U.S. industries, and that is still the argument that is used. There has long been this debate over whether or not tariffs should be in place, whether or not we should be putting a tax on goods coming into this nation from other places, because if we do that, the argument runs, therefore everybody will buy the American made product because it's just as good but now cheaper, and that will help American industry and American jobs and the American economy. The thing is, you can get into what are called tariff wars, where other nations will start putting tariffs on your stuff. And so the argument against tariffs is don't have them, and then there's no retaliation, and everybody's able to buy stuff cheaper worldwide. So, again, this is one of those issues I totally leave up to you. You can especially go through and debate this as seniors when you're taking econ. So, while there are a lot of folks that did want the tariffs in place, the question then becomes, well, at what level do we place them? Okay, now for 12 years, tariffs were a key issue in presidential elections. Now, we don't hear a lot about it anymore. In the last few years, there has been a lot of talk in regards to China, and President Trump has either threatened or actually put some tariffs on goods coming in from China. So there is always that question still remains as to should we use tariffs, what level should we use tariffs, and things along those lines. But for 12 years in the late 1800s, this was a huge issue in regards to politics. Now, it's not always going to be the same thing from election to election. You would probably have to look up right now what was the big issue in the 2016 presidential election, versus today's 2020 presidential election. Well, you can go back here to the late 1800s, and tariffs were a pretty commonality throughout all these different elections. There was an ongoing question about how is this going to benefit the American worker, the American economy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this was a big issue. Do we have tariffs? Do we not have tariffs? How much of a tariff should we have? On what should we place tariffs? Things like that. Now I'm going to give you another president's name, Grover Cleveland. Those of you who grew up watching Sesame Street might recognize the name Grover. You might remember Super Grover. But in this case, Grover Cleveland wanted to reduce the tariffs. He was one of the individuals who thought that the lower tariffs would actually benefit the economy in the long run. So he wanted those lowered, but unfortunately was not able to get it done. Presidents especially back then, did not have a huge amount of control over the economy and taxes and things like that. This has really always been, under the Constitution, the responsibility of the Congress. So President Cleveland wants to lower the tariffs, but he's not going to be able to get his wish. Okay, he does try, but is ultimately not going to succeed. 1890, another president, Benjamin Harrison. He signs into law the McKinley Tariff Act. Okay, and this raises the tariff level to the highest point ever. I mean, you're looking at 30+% on a lot of items. So basically, like if it originally cost $1, now it's going to cost at least $1.30. And that's going to go through and really cause a lot of benefits to some, but a lot of heartaches to others. So it's, again, presidents in politics and things like that, they're trying to find some kind of a balance that's going to do the best job for the country. Is it going to be possible that they always find the absolute perfect solution? Is it possible? Sure, why not? But is it likely? No, it's not going to be likely. You have to do the cost and the benefit to try and figure out what is the best bet for the nation. Now, you see, a second ago I said that Grover Cleveland tried and failed to reduce tariffs. Well, he's replaced by Benjamin Harrison, as you saw. And as a result, we actually have the only time ever that you have a president serving two non-sequential terms. Cleveland comes back and defeats Benjamin Harrison in 1892, and for a big reason was dealing with tariffs. He still didn't get them reduced, but you did have one president try. He, is then going to be replaced by Benjamin Harrison, who raises the tariffs even higher, and then you get Cleveland back again. So Cleveland does serve two terms. He is a two-term president, except somebody else had the job for 4 years between those two terms. Tariffs were going to be a huge issue in the American economy and the American political scene for quite a while, up to and including the Great Depression. In fact, there is the strong argument that a big chunk of the Great Depression happened because we kept putting more and more tariffs on things, and that was actually cutting off trade. So it's one of those things where you really have various presidents and the government trying to do what they see as best for the nation. Sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, the tariffs seemed like they were there to stay no matter what.